Coming up on The Returned.
I woke up, I wasn't in my body. I was still in the bedroom. I could see the bedroom. I was in the dark. I was a couple feet above the bed and I was rising. I was rising like really slow. There was someone talking to me. It was very clear. It was like she was right there. I know what's happening. She was telling me like, it's all over. I started to realize that.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today's guest has walked through darkness most of us can't even imagine and came back carrying a light. Tami LoPresti is a gifted numerologist who was forever changed after surviving extreme domestic abuse and experiencing a near-death experience that altered everything about life, purpose, and the unseen world. Tami, welcome to The Returned.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
or to be back.
Yes, I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah, round one didn't go so good, didn't it? But we're better now, though. It's all
Yeah.
good. So tell me, before we step into the near-death experience, I'd love to
Mhm.
understand who you were before it all happened. So if you could tell us what your life was like growing up, and
Sure.
did spirituality or religion play any role in your upbringing?
Yeah, I was really lucky to grow up in a house where being spiritual was very accepted because my mom practiced numerology actually. She studied it when I was 19 and she practiced it all my life. And so we were surrounded by, all those ideas, like all the outside of the box ideas, and
Mhm.
my grandmother on my dad's side, her and my mom were very close, and she practiced a lot of that kind of spiritual work as well. So it was very normal to talk about angels and talk about seeing angels in the clouds. And she taught me how to do like protection around myself and put bubbles around myself and, all kinds of things, so yeah, so I was lucky to be raised in a house where spirituality was very acceptable. Um,
Mhm.
and then my parents though were raised Catholic. So they I think that's why it was so acceptable because it wasn't in their lives, before that, so my mom actually didn't want us indoctrinated into anything. So, like, the only thing that I think was, like, the hidden rule that nobody ever said was that we had to believe in God, but other than that, we didn't have to believe in any religion. Um, and so she would take us to different churches, and we would be, like, different things all throughout my life. So yeah, so that's my experience with religion. We were like different types of religion at different times in my life, and that was really fun, Um, but it was fun because there was no requirement, So at one point we were like Jehovah Witnesses. At one point we were Mennonites, and another point we were like Lutheran, and we just kind of like would join a church and then go for a year or so, and then we'd be like, "Okay, we know about that one, so now let's go to a different one," And we did that pretty much my whole childhood, you know? So, um, what the result of that was that me, my brother, and sister, all 3 of us are not religious at all. Like, none of us are into religion. Um, I always realized that I never felt God in those places. Um, I feel God everywhere else but church, but those buildings, it always felt like that was the only place I didn't feel God. It was really odd to me actually. Um, but I had a really close connection to God in nature, but not ever in church, not until I got older and I found a church that was different, you know? But still to this day, I don't really go to church. So, like, I don't do any of that. But anyway, so that was my upbringing with, with spirituality and religion and all that. Um, we also had a lot of, like, ghost activity in my life, so we would, like, move into different houses, and there was a lot of activity in those houses. So my dad would always deny it, and I think he did that because he didn't want us to be scared, but it was, like, undeniable in some of the houses,
Mm.
and we actually lived in one house where there was a poltergeist, and, yeah, we had really bad experiences in that house, but we only lived there for a month, which is good. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, we had all different kinds of experiences, and it was kind of good though because it opened the door for my parents to talk about it, and for us to explore it. So it was just never off limits. Like, we were always allowed to talk about anything, and we were always allowed to believe anything that we wanted to believe, and we were allowed to ask questions, and my mom would always just, like, answer every question. Like, when I was little, I remember saying, like, "But what if, like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And where do we go? And what happens?" And she told me all about, like, the life review on the other side, and she told me that God would answer all my questions someday, and she would say, "All the things that I don't know how to answer, God will tell you someday," and that actually really helped me, you know?
I bet.
Um, so, anyway, at this point, I don't really believe in God as a being anymore. I believe in God as an energy, but that came later, like, after all of
Mhm.
my experiences.
So as life unfolded for you, you found yourself
Mhm.
in less than good circumstances.
Yeah,
And that is where the incredible, painful, and dangerous part
yeah.
came in.
Yeah. So I was a single mom, but I had a baby when I was 17, and then I was living on my own at about 2021, and, I was doing really good actually, but I was going through, like, life stuff, but I was still, like, really, like, I felt like I could take on the world, and I felt unstoppable, and I felt so capable, even though my car had, like, my engine went on my car, and I had to get a different job and all this stuff. I was still living on my own. I was paying all my own bills. I was happy. Everything was good, and I was taking care of my daughter. And then I met this man who, it was like a really weird whirlwind. Like, it was like I met him, and we got really caught up in each other really fast, and within 2 to 3 weeks, I found out I was pregnant, and then that was kind of like the beginning of this, like, snowball, you know, into a really bad situation, so I was living on my own in an apartment, and as soon as I found out I was pregnant, um, he convinced me to move in with him, and so I did, and then him and his friends convinced me to quit my job, and I did that, and the whole time I was thinking, like, I was thinking I was making the decisions because it felt like I was making the decisions, like, it felt like they were my ideas, but they were not my ideas, and I didn't really realize that until later. It was like a lot of things were kind of, like, sold to me in a way, and then I made the
Mm.
decision, but it was kind of like I was getting really in deep and I didn't realize it, and it was kind of like really fast, It was like, "Oh, move in with me," and then I got rid of my apartment, so I didn't have that stability, and then, "Oh, stop going to this job because the chemicals there are bad for the baby," and so I was like, "Okay," well, then I didn't have a job. Luckily, I had a lot of money saved, which was good, so I wasn't financially crippled, but I didn't have a car because my engine went on my car, and he was gonna help me buy a car, so he did help me buy a car, but he put it in his name, and so I wasn't even on the insurance. So it was like, I it was weird because it was like, I trusted him completely, and I was like, "Oh, well, he's gonna take care of me. I'm pregnant with his baby. He's gonna take care of me." And I thought, "Oh, well, it's okay," but then, months and months later, obviously I couldn't leave with the car or anything, you know? Um, and the other thing was he lived in the middle of nowhere, so there were, like, no neighbors, it was like, 3 acres of land, and there were neighbors, but they were really spread out, and so it was kinda like I found myself in the middle of nowhere, no job, pregnant, not a car in my name, and I did it all happened so fast that it was like I was stuck overnight. That's how it felt. And then within a month of living with him, he started becoming violent. Um, I had never dealt with domestic abuse, in my life, like, my parents weren't like that. They were verbally abusive, but they weren't physically abusive, so I had never seen physical abuse before like that, like, the extreme anyway. So when he started kind of throwing fits, I was confused because I never saw anybody act like that, like he would rip down the curtains and kick the trash can across the room, and I mean, he just did all these weird things that I never saw anybody do, and I didn't really know how to react to it because I didn't really think that people would physically hit you or hurt you, like, I knew that people did that, but I never had anybody do that, so I don't know, it was just weird, and so I didn't process it really right. I just kept thinking that it was my fault somehow, and so I kept just trying to get him to stop, like, every time he would get upset, I would start walking on eggshells so he wouldn't get upset, and then, like, when he would break everything in the house, I would just clean it all up and put it all back together. I just didn't know what to do, like, I didn't know how to deal with it. Anyway, it wasn't as bad while I was pregnant, like, while I was pregnant, he really broke a lot of stuff around me, and, um, and he was abusive to me physically, but not really, like, he didn't hit me and punch me and things like that. He would trip me a lot. Like, I would be walking past him and he would trip me and I would fall, or if I was walking past him, he would slam me into a wall, and so he thought it was funny, like, he would act like it was funny, and it was just weird because I had never, like I said, I wasn't in an abusive house like that. I was in an emotionally abusive household, not a physically abusive household. So, I didn't really understand that kind of abuse. I didn't really look at it as abuse. I looked at it like it was a very weird way that he communicated. Um and I didn't like it, but he wouldn't stop, and he acted like it was a joke, and I was covered in black and blue marks our whole relationship, like, my whole body was always black and
Oh
blue.
my goodness.
Um, so anyway, um, so fast forward to when I had the baby. um, I had the baby, and then I enrolled in school because I wanted to work and I couldn't work. So I was like going stir crazy and I ended up enrolling in business school. And then he like freaked out about that. Like that was like the end of the world, it felt like. And that really set him off. That's when he really got very abusive, like, because then I already had the baby, it was about a month after I had the baby. That's when he started actually, like, hitting me and, you know, being a different kind of violent. Like, before he was breaking things and just kind of passive aggressively, hurting me, but, like, now he was, like, physically hurting me, and it was different. Um, and then he got really fixated. So at some point, he got very fixated on him raising the baby and me not being a part of it. And that actually happened during my pregnancy. It started during my pregnancy. He told me he hired a lawyer when I was 6 months pregnant, and we were doing fine at the time. I didn't know we were fighting. And, like, I thought we were fine, and he was like, "I hired a lawyer," and I'm like, "For what?" And he's like, "I hired a lawyer because I'm gonna raise the baby and you're not," and I was like, "Okay." Like, I was so confused at that point, um, and then that kind of, like, it progressively got worse, and then after I had the baby, it was like that was the only train of thought, was that he was gonna raise the baby and I wasn't going to be allowed to, and so he started cheating on me, and he would have girls over, and um, like, when I was at school, he had girls over, and, like, I'd be leaving for school because I went to night school. I'd be leaving for school, and, like, one of his ex-girlfriends would be at the house, and I'd be like, What the hell? What's going on?" And then he would tell me later that he was having sex with them, and that, they were gonna help him raise the baby when he kicked me out and all this weird stuff, and anyway, it just got worse and worse. Um until finally, like, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but finally his, roommate sat me and my sister down. My sister was home from college visiting, and he sat us down and he said that my boyfriend had a he kept telling me that he had these big plans for my birthday, and it was really weird because he was, like, someone who never bought me anything before that, so, like, it was really weird that he kept saying, "I have something really big planned for your birthday," and I was excited about it because I thought, "Well, maybe he's coming around, maybe, it's getting better," and then his roommate sat us down and said, "No, he's planning to end your life on your birthday," and I was like, "Okay," and he said that, everybody was in on it, like the boyfriend's family, the other roommate had said yes, that he would help him, and, all these people were in on it, and, uh and he said he was telling me because he said no, so, like, they came him to him and said, "Would you help me? Would you help hide the body?" And he said, "No," and he said, "But the other roommate said yes." So I didn't know that people did this. I knew that Lifetime movies were real, but I didn't
Yeah.
actually perceive this as real in my own head. Like I said, I had never even been physically abused before. Like, I had been abused in different ways, but not this way. So, like, even that, it was like my brain really didn't understand this kind of stuff. Like, I was in this weird world where a lot of things were happening that didn't make sense. And I felt so stuck and I didn't know how to get out of it. And, um, so anyway, um, what happened was, I mean, there's a lot that happened. There's so many things that happened. I feel like I've told this story a few times now, and I kinda tell it different every time, but I tell different parts of it because I guess, like, I don't know, it just feels like different parts are important, and so, so anyway, it led to him getting really physically violent with me around that time. So, like, right before the roommate told me that, he had beat me up one day, like, pretty bad, and then maybe, like, a week after that, he had choked me until I turned blue, and I only know that I turned blue because he told me, like, he I remember the day, like, I remember the fight and everything, but I don't remember actually passing out and turning blue, like, obviously, I don't remember that part, he told me that part, but the other part leading up to it, I do remember he was being mean to my daughter, and he started hurting her, and I jumped on his back because he grabbed her, and he was, like, slamming her on the floor, and I jumped on his back and stopped him, and then he turned on me, and I told her to run to her room and lock the door, and she did, and then I ran and hid from him, and then when he found me, he pulled me up by my neck and held me like that in the air, I guess until I passed out. He thought that I was no longer breathing and that, like, when I turned blue, I guess, he thought that I was gone, and that's when he dropped me onto the floor, But I woke up and, and he had, like, left the house because he got mad that he realized I wasn't gone. He left the house, he, like, stormed out of the house because he was mad, and then, like, when he came back, I was feeding the baby, and he was just, like, telling me about how him and his family were discussing it, and they were all upset that I didn't pass away, like, that he didn't take me out. Anyway, so that's the only reason I know that I turned blue because he told me, that he said he wouldn't have let go unless he actually thought I was gone.
Wow.
Anyway, so that those are the things that were, like, leading up to this. Another strange thing that happened a few times was that his dad would tell me that they were going to kill me, basically. His dad kind of, like, made it like a joke, like, it felt like a joke, it was really weird. He would, like, put his arm around me, like, the time that I remember the most, okay? Like, he did it a few times, a few different ways, but the time that I remember the most, because I've said it a few times, after it, um, is he put his arm around me one time, and the family, like, their family was all, like, right out of earshot, like, they were in front of us, but they were, like, just out of earshot, and it was like he put his arm around me and kinda backed me up just a little bit,
Uh-huh.
and he said, "You see that backhoe over there?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "That's what we're gonna use to hide your body." And I just kinda looked at him like, "This is a weird
Wow.
joke," because he was laughing, like, he was, like, smiling and acting like it was a funny thing, and I just, like, I was confused, I didn't understand, like, I was pregnant at that time, and I didn't understand, like, why he would say that, so I just kinda, like, laughed with him because I didn't know how to react, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna hide you, and back here," like, he's like, "We're gonna hide you in the woods, and no one's ever gonna find you, and no one's ever gonna care, like, no one's gonna look anyway, like, nobody cares about you," and he just said stuff like that to me, which was not uncommon. Like, his family did talk down to me a lot, and they didn't have a lot of respect for women, and so it wasn't odd stuff for him to say, like, the threat was odd, but the rest of the stuff was very in line with how they talked, and they had a weird sense of humor that was twisted, so I didn't really, you know
Mhm.
I didn't really know how to take it, and these are some of the things that led up to it. Um, and then, so when the roommate told me that, he had this plot, I I worked on getting out of there. Like, I worked on actually leaving him, and so I did leave him. Like, I ended up leaving him, I think the day before my birthday is when I left him. I'm not exactly sure on the timing, but, um, I came home one night from school. I came home later than normal, and, when I came in the house, I didn't know it, but there were, dead rabbits on the porch. I didn't know that until the next day. But when I came in, there was, like, this light outside that, like, would shine through the living room, and the one roommate was sleeping in the living room that night, and there was a gun next to him, like a shotgun. And so I thought, "Well, that's weird," and I walked in, I took the shotgun, he was sleeping, I took the shotgun, I put it in the closet where they kept them because they had a bunch of guns. I put it away. Then I went to go into the bedroom, and the door was, like, cracked open and the TV was on, and this is the very first time and last time in all the years that I knew him that I ever saw him fall asleep to the TV on. He just didn't do that, like, he wasn't like that. Um, but the TV was on and he was sitting up, um and it was probably about 2 to 3 feet between the bed and, like, where he was at and the door, and behind the door, there was another shotgun. And so when I went to open the door, another one fell, and when it fell, I went, "Oh, what is that?" And it was a shotgun, and so I picked that one up, and I took it and put it in the closet, and then I kind of, like, thought, Like, I don't know what the plan was, okay? Like, I can't tell you what the plan was. It's not like anyone's gonna tell me what the plan was, okay? I really believe that one of them were going to pretend that I was an intruder that night or something, because I always came in late after school, and that night I had been at my mom's house researching women's shelters with my sister, so I didn't come home on time. And it was odd, all of those circumstances were odd, and then the
Mhm.
next morning, there were bunnies on, dead bunnies on the, porch, and I just thought, I just thought, like, they were gonna say something like they were hunting on the property all day or something, or some weird crap, even though they never did that before. It was just like, I thought that's what their story was gonna be, like, something like that,
Mhm.
because they were clearly in on it. It just happened to be right around the time that the roommate told me they had this murder plot. So it was like a whole thing. Anyway, I ended up leaving him the next morning. So the next morning, I waited for him to go to work, and then I got all my stuff together and I left him. Well, that day when I left him, I went to the courthouse. I got a PFA because I told them that he choked me until I turned blue about 2 weeks before that. I told them about all the abuse, um, and I also filed with Children and Youth because he had abused my daughter, my older daughter, and his roommate also threw a shoe at my daughter that day, the one that was in on it. He threw a shoe across the room and gave her a fat lip, and so I filed against him too. Well, when you file in court to get a PFA, like, the children and youth stuff, they followed up and all that, and it was all unfounded because I had no proof and whatever, I had nobody on my side. Um, but the PFA, you have to go to court and prove that this person actually abused you, and so you have to go, like, a week later. Well, when I went to court, he had this very high-priced attorney, and I had a women in crisis lawyer. My lawyer stood on his side the whole time and then told me that I needed to agree to everything that he wanted instead of, and then he also pretended to love me and all this crap. Like, he took me in the hallway and cried. I've never even seen that man cry. And so, like, all this weird stuff happened. I ended up getting turned down for the PFA because I had no proof that he did anything to me, and I had nobody on my side because it was all his friends and family that witnessed everything. Because my sister witnessed the roommate telling us that, but nobody would admit that anybody said that. So I didn't have anybody else that was a witness, and so they turned me down for the PFA, and they told me I had to give the baby to him that day. So I had to come back to the courthouse with the baby and give the baby to
Oh
him.
my god.
I was staying on a friend's couch at this time, and I couldn't leave the house with the car, so I had to get a new car. Like, it was all a big thing. Um, Anyway, I ended up going back to him within a month because I was gonna lose my baby, and I just could not handle that. Like, I knew that the court was gonna side with him because of what happened, what already happened, and I couldn't afford a high-priced attorney at that time. I was still in business school and not working, and so anyway, I went back to him, and um for the next few months, um, he was pretending to be the best man in the whole world, and, he was buying me all my iced tea. He was, we redid the house together, like, all this stuff. The iced tea is important, though, because I drank iced tea, like, this bottled iced tea. That's what I always drank.
Mhm.
This man never bought me anything, okay? Like, he
Mm.
bought me, like, one thing in our entire relationship, but now all of a sudden he was buying my iced tea, okay? And he told everyone in the house that they weren't to touch it, and if my daughter tried to drink any of it, she was, like, 4 or 5 at the time, he would, like, flip out, and he'd be like, "Don't touch that, that's your mom's," and I just thought he was being protective. I don't know why, but I just thought that. Um, anyway, he he kept doing that, and I kept having these moments where I would, like, lose touch with reality, like, just for no reason. I'm
Mhm.
not someone that ever did drugs, besides weed in high school, but I mean, like, I never even tried drugs, like, other than that, and I didn't drink or anything, and I was a very responsible mother, Um, I didn't know, but I think I was being drugged, like, I can't prove that, I can't prove what was happening to me, all I know is that I was losing touch with reality, and it was happening, like, one day I'd be okay, the next day I wouldn't, and it was, like, really weird, it was like I started
Mm.
to think that the radio was talking to me at times, like, not that it was like I thought they were talking directly to me, like, they were talking about, like, a job fair this one time, and I thought they were literally telling me to go to this job fair,
Ugh.
like it was for me somehow. And that kinda thing kept happening, and then he was gaslighting me, which I didn't know what gaslighting was until years and years later. I
Mhm.
had no idea what that was, but I would explain this, to people, and at one point, somebody said, "Oh, that's gaslighting," That's how I found out what it was. So him and his family were doing this weird thing to me where they would pretend that things that happened didn't happen, or they would pretend that things, did happen that didn't, like, they would just make up things, or they would just make me question my reality. So there was this one time that we went somewhere, and it wasn't any big deal or anything, but we went somewhere. We stopped at a gas station on the way home, we got gas, and then we just went home, and nothing really happened, but then later on that day, I was like, "Hey, remember when we were at the gas station?" And he's like, "We didn't go to the gas station today." And I was like, "No, remember, like, when we went to the gas station earlier, you got gas, I went inside." He's like, "We didn't do that, that didn't happen." And I was like, no, no, it did happen, like, it wasn't even a big deal, like, it wasn't there was no reason to do it, but he would act
Mhm.
like things didn't happen that did, and then he would act like things did happen that didn't, and it was just, like, making my brain fried, like, my brain couldn't think, and I was starting to question reality, and it was weird, and then I was having these moments where I was losing touch with reality on top of it, so, like, when you combine that, I was starting to not trust myself, and I was starting to, like, not understand what was going on around me, and I had no point of reference, like, I was surrounded
Mm.
by only his friends and family, I everybody in my life had been pushed out pretty much, and my sister now was back at college, and, it was just I had no point of reference to say you're not crazy, And so this happened for a few months, and then one day, we got into this weird fight, and he he, like, pretended he died. He, like, pretended he had a heart attack in front of me, and I believed it, like, I thought he actually did, which is another reason I think I was drugged because even when I think about it now, it's like it really happened, like, it feels like it really happened. He played the whole thing out, and then he played like he was dead for a while, and then he was telling me, like, that the ghost in the house didn't want me there, and then he was just doing all this weird crap. Eventually that night, he ended up tying me up, and he put me in my daughter's bedroom, and he left me there, and the kids went and slept in his room, and, I stayed in that bedroom all night, and I was screaming and crying. At some point, I must have fell asleep, because I was screaming for help, but there's no neighbors, and nobody was gonna come help me, and, I saw headlights, throughout the night, so I know his family came over at different points, but other than that, nobody came in that room all night, and then that I know of, and then the next day, he said that I was crazy and he called some mental health place to come and get me. Like there was this guy that showed up and he said that he was with some mental health facility and that they were going to take me there. And I uh I was crazy at that point, like, whatever they had done, like, all the things had just, like, compiled, and whatever it was, I had no sense of reality at that point. I started thinking that people weren't alive, and I started thinking all kinds of weird stuff. And then eh, so this is one of the reasons I believe I was drugged, okay? Like, I can't prove it. I Nobody's gonna tell me, like, nobody's gonna say, "Oh, yeah, we did that to you?" But when I came out to the living room, so I thought that if you walked through a doorway, you died. I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought at the time. So I didn't want anybody to walk through any doorways. And when I came out to the living room, like he untied my feet because my he had tied my ankles and my wrists, and he had untied my feet so I could walk. And I wouldn't let him untie my wrists because I didn't want his knife near my wrists. I didn't trust him. And so I came out to the living room, and his mom, I let her use scissors to untie my wrists because it was like tie wraps on me. And, God bless
Sorry.
you.
Sorry.
Um, and, she so this so her and his sister stood in front of me and pretended to be dead, like, they were mocking me, and they were dancing in front of me, and they were going, "I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead." That's one of the things that makes me know that everybody was in on it and that I was probably drugged, because I don't think if you thought someone was having a mental breakdown that you would do that. I I could be wrong, but that I don't think people would do that. And
Mhm.
so, not that people would do any of this, but they did. Anyway, I ended up at the hospital, and while I was at the hospital for 2 weeks, I was being given medication that was too strong for me, because I was a very tiny girl at the time. I was only 98 pounds. Um, I had been sick for months. Like, I had this, like, depot shot thing that made me have my period for 3 months in a row, like, really heavy, actually, and so I had been probably, like, blood depleted, I don't know, like, vitamin deficient for sure. So I had a lot of problems already, and so they were giving me this medication that was overdosing me, basically, and so anyway, that part's all a long story too, but, fast forward, I did get out of the hospital 2 weeks later. um, there was this other thing that happened. I don't know. I don't think I ever told anybody about this, but there was this other part that happened where I got sent home from the hospital a day early because they wanted to see how I would do at home, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, it was like some trial run thing. And so I went home for the day and I was like in like a catatonic state. Like, I was like a zombie because I was on so much medication. I mean, I was probably drooling, literally. I don't know if I was, but I probably was. He thought that I was not there, okay? Like, I know he thought that I was not mentally there, okay? But I was mentally there at that point, and I remember everything that happened that day. I remember the discussions we had in the car, I remember the discussions we had at the house, I remember the people that were there, I remember everything. Anyway, he he was sitting with me in the living room, and his family was in the dining room and kitchen with the kids. And he was telling me this whole story about how I am not the first girl that he did this to. And he was telling me about how his mom had to be broken by his dad, and she had been put in a mental hospital 3 times apparently, before his dad broke her. And then some other girl he told me about that he dated, he said nobody ever heard from her again because she ended up going crazy and no one ever heard from her again, and he told me this whole big long story. He told me a lot of things because he thought that I was in this catatonic state. He thought I was not mentally there, but I do remember everything that he told me. I don't know who that girl was, or anything, but it's definitely obvious that his dad broke his mom. Anyway, so he told me that that was the plan, that his dad was helping him learn how to break me so that he could have the baby, which, you know, who knows why. Anyway, so, anyway, I came home, the next day, because I guess that went well. I came home and I was home for 3 days, and during those 3 days, I was shaking, like, all the time, and it was because I was on this medication that was too strong for me, and or at least that's what I think is the reason, but I was shaking, like, all over all the time, and I couldn't, like, fall asleep because I was shaking so much, and it was crazy, and anyway, it was because I was being overdosed, I think, and on the 3rd night, at some point, I fell asleep because I would shake and shake, and my teeth would chatter too, and I was, like, really cold too. It was weird, and, anyway, I fell asleep at some point, and I woke up, whenever after I fell asleep, and I wasn't in my body anymore. So, like, I woke up, and I was still in the bedroom. I could see the bedroom. I was in the dark, but it was, like, a little bit lit up because there was a light outside, so
Mhm.
I could see him, I could see me. Well, I didn't notice I could see me at first. I could see him, but I was a little bit above the bed. I was a couple feet above the bed, and I was rising, but I was rising, like, really slow. And, like, right here, there was someone talking to me, and it was very clear, it was like she was right there. I used to call her an angel, but now I know that she's my main spirit guide. I know that because I've met her now, but back then, I always called her an angel. And what I heard was, it was telepathic, it wasn't really words, and it wasn't really, it was like a song. It wasn't like we
Mhm.
talk, it sounded like a song, and it sounded like the prettiest song I've ever heard. But what she was saying was, "Come on, it's time to go now. It's time to go now." And as she would say that, it was like she was lifting me, but I was lifting very, very slowly. And I looked and I saw my body on the bed. Like I saw myself sleeping, and I saw him sleeping, and I was like, "What's happening?" Like I didn't know what was happening, and it just kept happening where she's like, "Come on, it's time to go. It's time to go now," and as she's doing that, she's telling me like 100 things, like all at the same time. And she was telling me, like, "Everything you've done is okay, like, you didn't make any mistakes, but you're not gonna be in any pain anymore. It's all over, you did the best you could, everything's good, it's time to go now," and she just kept saying, "It's time to go now, it's time to go now." And, like, she was like, "Nothing's wrong, everything's okay," and it was this, like, overwhelming love that I felt, like, I
Mhm.
felt like the most love. I've never felt love like that in this lifetime, but it felt like this love was just encasing me all the way around my body, and it felt like it was inside of me and outside of me, and it felt like the only thing that existed was love. There was no pain at all. There was nothing scary about it. There was not She was the most beautiful thing I have ever felt in my whole life by times 100. She was the most beautiful, wonderful feeling I've ever felt, and I was like, "I'll go anywhere with you, like, I'll go to the ends of the earth with you?" She was the best feeling I've ever had, and so I started to go with her, and I started, like, raising up, and I didn't go, like, all the way to the ceiling or anything, it was just a few feet, but I started to realize that I was dying, and I would go, "Oh, wait, wait, no, 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 I can't do that, I can't do that," and then I would sink back down, and then she would do it again, and she would go, "Come on, it's time to go now, there's nothing wrong, everything's okay," and
Mhm.
she was, like, guiding me out of my body and guiding me up, and she was telling me as this was happening that, like, you know I did everything the way I was supposed to. Nothing's wrong. Everything, this is exactly what was supposed to happen. And this is all normal and everything's okay. And she's just like telling me all of this. But it was like I would forget what was happening because I was just like, "Oh, take me. This is amazing." Like it just felt like the most amazing feeling. And I was like, "Let's go. Let's go everywhere." And then I would get to a point where I'd have this realization. I'd go, "No, no, 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 no. I can't die. I can't die. I don't want to do that." And then I would sink back down. And that happened a few times. And so the way she was talking to me kind of changed. It was like first she was talking to me, telling me, "It's okay. Come on, it's time to go and everything's fine." But then like we got to a point where she started telling me that it was my choice, because I was like, "But I don't wanna go." And she's like, "Well, you don't have to go." She just said, "The pain will end if you go, and you planned this. Like, this was a plan that you could go now." And it's crazy because just, a few weeks before that, I had tried to commit suicide. And even a couple months before that, I tried again. Like I had tried to commit suicide twice in that time period. So like it's not like I wanted to live. But then of course, like
Mhm.
having somebody actually taking me out, then all of a sudden I did. And so, anyway, so we kept doing this, and then we got to a point where it changed, like, the conversation changed, and she was being very real with me then. It wasn't like she was just holding my hand and guiding me and helping me make this transition. Now she was talking logic with me, and she's like, "Listen, you don't have to go. This is all up to you. Everything is up to you. This is your choice. You can go if you want to go, or you can stay if you want to stay, but you need to make a decision. And based on that decision, I'm going to tell you, different things. So I said, well, I don't really know what I want to do because it felt so good. And then what happened was she brought this, like, TV in front of me because I started worrying about my family and my kids and everything, and she brought this, like, TV screen, and what's funny is that I still have that screen in my head, like, I never did before that, but now after that, this is where the guides show me things now, you know, is on this TV screen. It's the same thing as what she did. So she pulls this TV screen in front of me. It looks like a screen. And she showed me my so like she would show me like my mom, and she would show me where she is now and then where she's going to be if I leave. And it wasn't just that she would show me like my mom. It was like she was showing me all of her life, all of her ideas, all of her thoughts, all of her everything. Like, it was like in a moment, I knew everything that my mom was experiencing and had experienced all at the same time, and it was like, "This is where your mom is now," and then she would pull like, it was like she would pull an image and go, "This is where your mom is now," and then she'd pull the next image and go, "And this is where your mom's going to be when you leave," and it was like I would see the entire story, like, I
Mm.
would see everything that she dealt with before up until that point and what she was thinking right now, in, like, real time, and then I would see everything that she was gonna go through in my loss, and then what would happen after that. And so she was showing me, like, the whole full picture, and she's like, "So see, your mom made this plan too, and has a backup plan, and everything's gonna be okay." Then she showed me my dad, and then she showed me my sister, and my brother, and my best friends,
Mm.
and just everyone in my life she would show me, and it was fine, like, all of them. I was like, "Okay, they're all gonna be okay. They're gonna be sad, but they're gonna be okay. They're gonna get through this, and it's gonna be okay. Their life is gonna go on." But then, sorry, even when she got to my 5-year-old, she was, like, 4 or 5 at the time, she was going to really suffer if I left. but she was still going to be okay. And she showed me how her dad would fight my mom for custody, but in the end, he would agree with my mom and let her raise her, and then they would share the responsibility somehow. And like she showed me all of this. And then and I was okay with that. Like that was even something I was okay with. It was like, okay, she's going to be okay too. And then she got to the baby though. And when she showed me the baby, it was like she said, so everyone knew that this could happen. This was a plan that could happen. And everybody has backup plans if this happens. It's totally okay, even the baby. And she said, so she knew that this could happen. And so it was almost like it was right with her soul, is what she was trying to say to me. Like everyone's gonna be okay. And then, but then she showed me what was gonna happen to the baby, and the baby was going to be raised by his family. I wasn't gonna have any She wasn't gonna have any interaction with my family at all at some point, and she was going to be corrupted, in my opinion, like, to their beliefs and all of that. And I just couldn't that was what I couldn't live with, and when I say this, I always say that's what I couldn't die with, because
Mhm.
I couldn't leave her that way. Like, I couldn't let that happen because I felt like I made a promise to her to be her mom, And so that's what made me actually change my mind and come back. And so when I saw that, I said, "No, I need to go back." And she said, "Okay, well then you can go back." And so then at that point she started preparing me for going back. And so I don't know like how long this whole thing took. It felt like a year. Like I don't know if about a year, but I mean it felt like it was a really long time, but it probably wasn't very long in real, human time. But anyway, she spent a long time telling me about how life works and what was going to happen next. And like it was like somebody said recently, it felt like so like someone on my podcast was talking about his near death experience, and he said it was like they gave me a whole book of knowledge, like an entire book,
Mm.
like a big book of knowledge. And I was like, yeah, that's about how I would say it too. It felt like they told me so much in such a short amount of time. It was like it could fill a whole book, like a big book,
Mhm.
because she told me like how life works and how, like how we make plans and why we make plans. And, she just told me like all the things that I had questioned, like those questions I had when I was little. It was like she answered all those questions and more.
Mhm.
And she was like, she then prepared me for going back, and she said, "It was really, really hard already. It's going to get worse before it gets better." And she said, "It's going to be really painful and it's gonna be really, really hard." Like, she really stressed how hard it was going to be and how, like, you have not gone through the worst yet. If you go back, it's going to get a lot worse. And, that was really hard because like, I had already made the decision to come back. I was definitely going to come back. But, like, no matter how much she prepared me, what she was saying to me scared the heck out of me, And
Aw. Mm.
I was like, "I don't know how I could survive worse than that,"
Mhm.
And so but she told me I could, and she said, "If you really want to, you can, and we will be here for you," and she told me that I was very guided and that I would be guided through this. It was just gonna be really hard, and so I did come back, and it was exactly what she said. It got a lot worse before it got better, and it didn't get better anytime soon. When I first came out of this, I woke straight up out of bed. It was like midnight or something. And I just like sat straight up and I went, "Oh my God, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying." Like I couldn't calm down because I was like, I'm dying. And my dad was staying with us at the time. He had flown in from California and he was at the hospital, and then once I came home, he was staying with me to help take care of the baby and everything, and my other daughter, So he was in the dining room working on his computer when I came out, and I said, "Dad, I'm dying. I'm dying. I'm dying. I'm dying," you know, because my ex didn't care. Like, he just didn't want anything to do with it. He woke up and he goes, "What the hell are you talking like, what are you complaining about?" or something, and I was like, "I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying," and he didn't care. He's like, "Whatever, I have work tomorrow," and he just went to sleep. But I called the doctor. I had a family doctor at the time that I had had for years, and I called him. I called, you know, the service, the middle of the night service thing, and then they called him, and then he called me back. And when he called, I said, "I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying." And he said, "Slow down." And he goes, "What happened?" And I said, "I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying." And I couldn't tell him what happened because I had just gotten out of a mental hospital. I knew they were just gonna put me right back in if I told anybody, so I didn't tell anybody what happened except my dad. And, and he said, "Okay, calm down. What medication did they put you on?" And he knew my history because he was my doctor for a long time at that point. And I told him the medication I was on and the dosage and all of that, and he said, "Okay, you're right, you're dying." He's like, "You are being overdosed." And he said, "You need to immediately go to the same gas station I was talking about earlier, because there was only one in our town, you know?" He said, "You need to go there right now," because it was like 24 hours, "and you need to get Benadryl," because Benadryl was the only thing that counteracted this medication, he said, that he knew
Mhm.
of, you know? And so I went and got Benadryl, and then when I took it, it it sent me into, like, convulsions because it counteracted the medication or something, and so that whole night, I said I was having seizures. I don't think I was having seizures. I was having convulsions, though, like, where my whole body was like I said it was shaking before. It was shaking, like, on a low level before, but now it was, like, violently shaking. Like, my whole body was violently shaking and
Mm.
my teeth were chattering, and, my dad was, like, holding me throughout this, you know, like, I would go into these convulsion attacks, I guess you could call them, and it would, like, happen for, like, a few minutes, and then it would stop, and then it would happen again, and that happened all night. That actually happened for 2 days, and my
Oh,
dad just
man.
kept saying, "Go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, get anything out that you can, just keep going to the bathroom," and he kept giving me water and telling me to drink things, and he's like, "Just go to the bathroom," you know, because we were trying to get the medication out of my system, you know? And then I spent, probably, I wanna say, like, 2 years, maybe more. I had panic attacks that were really, really bad for a long time. Like, I started having panic attacks, and um, I thought that they were heart attacks at first or strokes, or I didn't know what they were. I kept going to the doctor, and I ultimately stopped seeing my family doctor because one time I went there, they hooked me up to all these, like, this heart machine thing, and, I heard him in the hall talking about me, and he called me a mental patient, you know, and so I did ultimately stop seeing my doctor at that point. Um, but it was I was having panic attacks, I was having, like, PTSD or something, and it took me a long time to not a long
Mhm.
time, but it took, like, a couple weeks to get off that medication, and then it took a couple years to kind of, like, calm down from all of that trauma, you know? And then we ended up fighting a 6.5-year custody battle until finally it was
Wow.
over, you know? So, yeah, it was really bad.
It
So
sounds like there was such a mix of things going on, like,
yeah,
you know, wow.
it's a lot, I
I don't
know.
even I feel so horrible for you, actually.
Yeah.
Um, y I can't I understand, though, when you say, um like, I know there's probably gonna be audience members that might say, "Well, why
Mhm.
would you stay in something?" Because people will wonder
Mhm.
that,
Yeah, of
but what I
course.
can say and what I do know is
Mhm.
that I stayed in a 17-year, abusive
Right.
relationship
Wow.
before I
Wow.
left, and it was really,
Yeah.
really hard, and,
Yeah.
before the whole term gaslighting came in,
Mhm.
that's what was happening, and I didn't realize that's what was happening, and
Yeah.
so I do empathize with you. It is really difficult to
Mhm.
see things clearly
Mhm.
when someone is playing with you,
Yeah.
so I'm really sorry that happened to you, Tammy.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
and also
They
your poor babies having to,
yeah. No, they
be
went
around
through
that.
they went through a lot, and they still go through a lot because now they're trying to have a relationship with him as an adult, and it's hard for them,
I
because they don't know how to come to terms with what happened. They kinda just one of them ignores it, the other one doesn't know what to do with it? Um
yeah.
I
S
tell them, they're allowed to love their dad no matter what happened
Mhm.
with us, of course. But yeah, I ended up having a second baby with him because I went back to him, and that's not even when I got pregnant. I got pregnant just one random day when we were sharing custody, it was a whole thing. But yeah, this is the thing. People don't understand abuse. Like, I didn't understand abuse. I didn't understand what abuse was, and I had been abused at home all of my childhood, but it was different kinds of abuse. It was never physical, and I never had anybody gaslight me before. I didn't know what that was. Um, I never had people do it together, where, like, they knew the truth, but I didn't know the truth. I never had that happen before in my life where people would, like, all pretend that something did or didn't happen, and it was just that's, like, I don't know, it's something that messes with your mind on a level that you don't know how
Ye
to comprehend, and you don't even realize it until years later. Like,
Mhm.
it took me years later to look back on this and see what I even thought happened, because I couldn't make any sense out of it for the longest time.
You make a good point there, and when you're in an abusive relationship, you do a lot more judging yourself than
Yes.
anything, and
Yes.
then you don't believe, "Maybe I'm making this up."
Yeah.
You start doing that kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
very, very difficult to leave. It is very it's a mixture of mental and physical,
Yeah.
and mental is very hard. Physical, it goes away, but it's
Yeah.
still really hard, and years
Yeah.
later, it
Yeah.
can come out, and panic and all sorts of things can happen from
Mhm.
trauma that you actually stuffed deep down inside.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
unfortunately, you know, I was thinking while you were talking, and I was writing as well. What
Mhm.
do you think that you had to go through that for?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Mhm.
So, for a long time, I I really wouldn't have been able to answer that question because I was just angry, you know? And I would have told you, "This happened to me, not for me," you know? And I would have told you that I had no power in it, and I had no power to change it, and like, that's how I felt for a really long time. And then I got to a point where I I had to come to terms with what I actually believe, and I said, "What do I believe?" And what's so interesting is that during this time that I was with him, like, I had times where they were really, really scary and really bad. Like, there was a time where I remember hiding under a table or something. Like, I was hiding in the back room under something. I was in the dark and I was hiding, and I was there for maybe an hour or something. And I remember being in that dark room hiding and feeling like I didn't mean anything to anyone in the whole world, and that maybe it didn't matter if I died. And and I remember even in that darkest, most terrible moment, knowing that I chose this somehow on some level. Like, I remember thinking that in that moment that I wasn't alone, even though I felt alone and there was nobody with me, it just, I felt alone. Um, but I remember knowing that I wasn't alone and that this was a choice. It was like someone was reminding me even in that moment. And so years later, when I looked back, I went, well, what do I believe? Do I believe that I planned this for some reason? Or do I believe that this was some hijack of my soul? Like, I don't know. Um, and then I said, "No, I believe that we plan our life. And if we plan our life, I must have done this for a reason." And then I said, "Okay, well, what would those reasons be?" And so I thought back to those times. I thought about how I couldn't hate him no matter what he did to me. I had this weird thing where I just couldn't hate him. I didn't like him and I didn't want him near me, but I couldn't hate him. And on some level, I knew that I actually loved his soul, not his person, but his soul. And I kept going back to that. And then I thought, well, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do now if I didn't go through that then, because I wouldn't
Mhm.
understand people on the level that I understand them now. I understand trauma on a level that you can only understand if you experienced it.
That's right.
And so I know that. And then also I decided that if I made this plan, some higher self me knew that this was the right thing to do somehow, why would I do that? And how would I do that? And I thought why I would do that is so that I could get to this side of my life where I'm helping a lot of people. And
Mhm.
how would I do that? I would choose somebody that I trusted a whole lot. That's what I really believe. I believe that on the other side, me and him are the best of friends somehow. Like, our souls are the best of friends. I believe that we took a role in this lifetime to abuse each other, and I maybe in a different lifetime, I'm the abuser. Like, maybe we take turns, I don't know. But I believe that in this lifetime, he signed up to abuse me because he was someone that I really trusted somehow on the other side.
Mhm.
And maybe that's why I couldn't hate him. I don't know. That's just what I've come to live with it. I don't really know what the truth is. I just know that I had to make sense of it. And the other thing I had to decide was, when did I lose my power in it? Like,
Mhm.
so to stop feeling like a victim, I had to find my power, because I was like, there had to be a point where I could have walked away. There had to be a point where I chose this. Like, there was definitely a point where I wasn't choosing anymore, but there was definitely a point where I was. And so even though it was in the way beginning, I found that point, and when I found that point of power, that empowered me now. Like, that took that victimhood away, and it made me go, "Okay, I could have walked away." Because at the time, I didn't feel like that. And years later, I still didn't feel like that. I felt like I was taken advantage of and I was a victim and everyone bullied me and it was horrible, and I
Mhm.
couldn't find any power in it. But when I really looked at it, I went, I could have left here. I could have left here. I could have left here. I could have. That was where my power was. And that's actually what helped me to never get in a situation like that again, because now I've recognized my power right before it's about to be taken away. You know, I
Oh my
I can
goodness, I
see
hope
it
so.
now. Yeah, I can see
You
it now,
know,
you know?
Tammy, it sounds to me as if this experience and say if no, if I'm wrong, please say it.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
sounds like this near death experience actually helped you turn your pain into purpose or into
Yeah.
passion. And it
Yeah.
sounds like it catapulted you into the next turning point.
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
maybe take or turning or sorry, moving the trajectory of your life a different way.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, how did that begin to fester for you after? Like, when did you start becoming more spiritual? Was it right away or was it just a little
Um,
bit after?
so it's funny because I turned off I grew up very spiritual, like I said. Um, and then I turned off all of my spiritual gifts because my best friend got murdered when I was 16. She was killed. And I was mad at God. I was mad at the
Mhm.
universe. I was mad at the world. I was mad at everybody. I couldn't stop being mad. And I was very psychic all my life. And I told God in that moment, I said, "I don't want any of this. I don't wanna know when people." I used to know when people would die, but I didn't know that she was gonna die, and now later, I know that I did have signs, but I didn't know then, and it wasn't the typical signs that I get, and I said, "I don't want any of this," and so I shut off everything spiritual all the way up until after my near-death experience. It was like it it was actually right around that time that I started even considering being spiritual again, you know? I was always some level of spiritual, but it was like it was only maybe a few months before that that I had gotten a Reiki healing, and that was the first time I got that done, and so I had started to entertain spirituality again, on a very low level, but then after it I really still didn't want anything to do with spiritual stuff, like, it was
Mm,
like, I was I think I was too broken at first, like, I was too
mhm.
scared to go there, and I knew that I didn't want anybody to think I was crazy, like, going to a mental hospital, I mean, that was really scary, like, that was entirely bigger than anything I could handle, like, because you have no power there and you're, like, locked in, and, I mean, it was just a regular hospital, but it was like I wasn't allowed to leave, and people were controlling my life, and they even had, like, a court hearing inside the hospital, which I didn't know that they did. They were trying to put me away for 2 years because I had, um I had really good insurance that time like, at that time, from my last job, and so they were trying to put me away longer. Luckily, that's why my dad flew in actually, my mom and my dad came there, and I didn't even know that they had a courtroom in the hospital until this, but they do, and they had a full court hearing to decide to put me away, but because I had never had any mental illness before that, they couldn't diagnose me at that time, and so that's why they couldn't win, like, they couldn't
Mhm.
do that, thank God. But yeah, I was scared to be spiritual because I was scared that if I told anybody any of this, they would just lock me up, Like, it was crazy.
Oh,
So
I understand that. I really do.
yeah,
Many people do talk about that. How do
yeah,
you think that do you think that your near-death experience opened that avenue then for you again? Or were
yeah,
you already going yes? Yeah.
absolutely. So I started knowing things that I didn't know before, like so, like, physically, I was scared of the world, okay? Like, my physical body, I was terrified of, like, because I was having panic attacks, I was having
Mhm.
PTSD, I was having a lot of trauma. So physically, I was going through a lot, but spiritually I now knew something that I didn't know before. I knew all the answers that I had never known, and
Right.
it was like I suddenly knew how life worked and why it worked the
Mhm.
way it did. The other thing that happened during my near-death experience that was crazy, that felt profound is that when I came out of that, I realized that that was real and this wasn't. And so, like, that was the clear thing that I knew for sure. I was like, whatever that was that moment, those moments were more real than any day of this life has ever felt by a lot. And so I
Mhm.
realized right away that this is like some kind of play that I'm playing Tammy, you're playing MJ, and next time we'll play different characters. Yeah, so it was hard to take it seriously then after that. And so, like, I had this
Mhm.
I wanna say it was like a high level of understanding of what life really was, and I knew that all this physical stuff was not real, but it was very real that I was suffering through it, you know? Um, like like it was real, it was just not real in the way that I thought of reality before, and so yeah, so it led me into being very spiritual, but it took me years to finally tell anybody. So, like, I told my family, but I didn't tell anybody outside of my family, like, not even friends. I didn't tell anybody because I was
Mhm.
scared that people would put me away again,
Yeah.
and the whole near death experience, like, I used to say that it was an angel that came to me. I really believed that at the time. I believed that for a lot of years, actually, just up until about 2 or 3 years ago, I believed that until I met my main spirit guide and I recognized her voice. Um, but, but I didn't actually admit to myself that that was real all the way, even though it was like I kept trying to pretend it wasn't real to myself, and then somebody told me a story of his near-death experience because he had overdosed on medication, and when he told me his story, it was almost identical to mine, like he would explain it the same way that I would have explained it if I would have told anybody, and that was when I went, "You know what? This was very real, and this I knew it was real, but it wasn't as unusual as I thought it was, you know?" And that's when I was like, "You know what? I think it's okay to be spiritual." And right after that, it was like I think that that was an unlocking for me because that was the week that I was moving home to be with my mom, and I stayed with my mom for a year. That was the year that I learned numerology, you know? So I think that was me finally accepting my spirituality, you know?
That's probably exactly what it was, and
Yeah,
many times, like, just for instance, myself, after my near-death experience, I
yeah.
ended up going and having massive panic.
Oh,
Um, I remembered everything that happened, but for some reason, my
yeah,
brain went, "Nope," and I
yeah,
locked in on the
yeah,
experience, and
yeah,
it actually I actually was like, "Oh my god, I actually died."
yeah,
Like, and then I honed in on that. Then it
yeah,
caused me like a PTSD. So
yeah.
every time my heart would even flutter, oh my gosh, it was just
Oh, me
it
too.
was horrible. Like, and
Yeah.
then it was 7 years.
Mm,
Then all of a sudden it came back and I was
mhm.
just like, "Oh my god." Like it's so strange how it
You
happens.
know
It's like mhm.
when you said that, I think mine was about 7 years as well. Yeah, that happened when I was about 22, 23, and it was the year I was 30 that I learned numerology. So, yeah, I think it was 7 years actually,
Because
right
you know
around there.
why too? I often
Yeah.
think it's because our humanness gets in
Mhm.
the way.
Mhm.
It stands in our own way. And so it
Yeah.
goes, "Oh my God, you just died. You need to
Yeah.
be freaked out. You need to be,
Yeah.
having panic. This is this is what I felt like."
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
wouldn't stop. I didn't have
Yeah.
time to process the other
Yes.
part because I was too stuck on thinking about me actually dying with a
Yeah.
freak heart issue that never happened
Yeah.
again. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. I
Yeah.
really do get that. So,
Yeah.
having said that, do you think actually, no. Where do you believe, or if you know, the
Mhm.
other side is? Where is the other side? Is or heaven or the afterlife, whatever you'd like to call
Yeah.
it.
Where
Where
is it?
is that in your opinion?
Yeah. So, I asked a lot of questions about this actually. Um, Not back then, but more recently, I
Mhm.
had my ex died my other daughter's father passed away in 2020, and after he died, I grieved him really hard for a solid year, And during that year, he kept coming to me, like, he came to me he still comes to me actually, but he came to me a lot that year. Yeah. And, and I started asking a lot of questions like, "What goes on there, and where is it, and how does it work?" Okay, so I was told so this is the thing, when I ask questions, I get answers, and, but I just didn't think to ever ask before this. So
Mhm.
I said, "Well, how does that work?" Like, I've always heard that they're here with us, and I know he's here because it's like you can feel him in the room, he's so strong, you know? It's undeniable that he's here, you know? Um, but, like, but where is he? Because I can't see him, but he can see
Mm.
me, and so they told me my guides, you know, told me that it's kind of like when you are watching a movie, like a police show or something, and they have a double-sided mirror. They can see you, but you can't see them. And they
Ooh.
said, "But there's no actual mirror." Like, there's no division actually between the dimensions, but their dimension and your dimension like, our dimension and their dimension are actually right at the same place. They're
Wow.
just divided by, an invisible line, kind of, like
And would it be like a frequency then? Like,
yeah,
would there be a higher or
yes.
higher frequency?
The other thing that I believe, and this I did not ask about, but this is what I believe from my near-death experience, I believe it's a few feet above us, just a little bit. I don't think it's much. I don't think it's, like, way up at the ceiling, but I do think it's, like, in space or whatever, it's a few feet above
Mhm.
us, because I was raised just a little bit, and then I was going, like I was not going up,
Oh.
up. I was going sideways a little
Oh.
bit, it seemed like.
It
I'm not really sure about that, but that's what it felt like, you know? The thing I noticed the most was even when I got to the highest point, I was still only a few feet off the bed, you know? And so I thought
is that when you were looking at yourself? So
mhm,
you would then, say, "Oh, I'm only a few feet off the bed because I'm looking down at myself?"
yeah. Well, and what's weird is, like, I could see everything without
Oh.
turning, you know? Like, it was like
Mhm.
I was above myself. Yeah, I was above myself, but I could see the whole room, I could see everything in it, I could see everything everywhere actually, but I wasn't trying to, but I could. I knew my dad was right on the other side of that wall in the dining room.
Mhm.
That's how I knew when I came out there he was right there, you know, because I knew he was still awake, but I knew it because I had seen him, like, I could see everything you could see everything. It was weird, it was like, you don't just perceive it, you see it, like I don't know how to describe that. I've never talked about that before, but yeah, you can see everything. Um,
You know, when you
yeah.
say that, I think about mine because
Mhm,
I had someone on and I was interviewing them, and her and I were talking
mhm,
before. You know how I
mhm.
love to talk before.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
anyways, she had said something to me because she also had gone to this black space, okay?
Mhm.
She had said she felt like a pair of eyes. And for the first
Mm,
time in years,
mm,
that is exactly what I felt like.
hmm.
Was
Yeah,
a pair of eyes. Like, I
yeah.
know it sounds weird, but, you know, sometimes you'll
Mhm,
meet someone and they finally just articulate it just perfectly, and
mhm.
it's like, "Oh my god, that's what I felt like," but I
Yeah.
felt like a pair of eyes where I could see everything,
Yes.
but I was,
Yeah,
like, very tiny. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, it was the
yeah.
craziest thing,
Do you know
but
another thing that happened to me that was separate from this, I was in, my first QHHT session, um, I was under hypnosis, and I went to visit this life where I was an alien, I think I don't know if I was an alien, I was on a spaceship, though, and we were traveling through space, and it was just very normal, it wasn't abnormal. I was, like, picking my kid up from school or something, I think I was a man, and we were going really fast, and we were flying through space, and we were in some kinda spaceship, and I was in a space suit, like a white fitted suit. Um, anyway, she pulled me out of that because she was afraid I was gonna get sick because we were going really fast and I started to get nauseous, you know? And,
Oh.
um, and so she pulled me out of it because she was worried I was gonna get sick. Otherwise, I wish I would have explored that more. But, anyway, when she pulled me out of it, she said, to go to the next, like the next most important place or something like that. I went to this place that I never heard anyone talk about, so I'm not saying no one knows about it, maybe they do, but I didn't, and I still don't. I still haven't heard anyone talk about it. I went to this place that I can only call, like, the in-between. I don't know what else to
Mhm.
call it, but it was like she's like, "Well, where are you?" And I said, "I'm nowhere." And she said, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "I'm nothing." And she said, "So you're nowhere and you're nothing." And I said, "Yeah, I'm nowhere and I'm nothing." And I was, like, in between lives, like, I had left that life and not started the next life yet, and I said I was nowhere and I was nothing. And she said, "Well, where are you?" And I said, "I'm nowhere." And she said, "Well, what do you see?" And I said, "Nothing. There's nothing here. It's just blackness. All I saw was black." And she said, "Well, are there people or souls or is there anyone anywhere?" And I said, "Yeah, there's people somewhere. Like not people, but there's, someone somewhere because I heard echoes of voices, but they were way off in the distance, like and they weren't really voices, but I could tell someone existed somewhere and that I could get to them if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. And she said, "Well, what are you doing there?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "Well, do you exist?" And I said, "I don't wanna exist right now. I'm not ready to again." And it was just
Oh my
like
g
it was this weird in between space, so then so I went there, and it wasn't scary at all, like, I was perfectly happy, I was totally in control of it, that was the other thing,
Mhm.
it was like, I knew that I could join them if I wanted to or not if I didn't, and I wasn't ready yet, and I didn't care, and I had no feelings about it, I was just like, "I'll join them when I feel like it again," And she said 'cause she said that, she said, "Will you join them?" I said, "Yeah, when I want to," you know? Um, so
M'kay.
then so then I went to the next life, and we did this whole went through the whole life and everything, and I got to my deathbed, and I died on the deathbed, and my husband was in the room and all this stuff. I remember dying. I remember, like, my body was heavier at the end than it was earlier. I remember not being able to breathe right. She had to tell me that it was
Oh
okay to
my.
breathe and that I wasn't really experiencing it because I could feel myself not being able to breathe. Anyway, so then I died, and then she said, "Well, where are you?" And I said, "I'm nowhere. I'm nothing." And
Oh,
she said, "Are you in that place again?" And I said, "I am. I always go to this place after it." And she said, "Well, why do you go there?" And I said, "'Cause I want to." And she was like,
wow.
"Yeah." So I never heard
That
anybody
makes
talk
me
about it.
wonder.
Yeah.
Because you know what? My
Yeah.
birthday's next month,
Yeah.
and a guest is giving me
Mhm.
a past life regression on my
Cool.
birthday. So
Cool.
I'm actually thank you for bringing that up
Yeah.
because I wonder what I'll have to contact you and tell you what's going on after I have
Yes.
it.
I wanna
I'm
hear about
hoping
it.
that it will be good.
I
I'm
mean, I've
scared though,
never
a
I've
little
never
bit,
had
but
a bad one. I did 3
like it's
QHHT
just like you're
sessions.
out, right? You're just like sleeping.
You're not even sleeping. Like, you're wide awake, you just have your eyes
What?
closed. It doesn't even feel like you're under hypnosis. One of mine's actually on Gaia now, like, on Gaia TV, one of my QHHT sessions, and that one I was murdered, which is crazy.
Tammy, if I was to ask you now
Mhm,
if you feared death now,
mhm.
and also what advice would you give to someone you were sitting beside that was getting ready to transition?
Okay. So I do not fear death at all, not even slightly. Like I could die this minute and I'm totally fine with it.
Don't say
Um, well, I mean, I'm not going to though. I mean, we're all in agreement that it's not my time yet. I've asked, but I really feel very comfortable with death. Death is not scary at all. It's not painful. Even if your body experiences pain, you do not feel any pain because you come right out of your body right away. So there's no pain. That's what I used to be afraid of. I used to also be afraid that you would close your eyes and there'd be nothing. That's definitely not true, you know? Um, if I was sitting with someone now that was about to transition, which I have been in the room when people have transitioned. I was there with my dad. I was holding his hand when he
Oh.
transitioned. I was there with my ex's dad, the one who threatened me, said he was gonna kill us. I was in the room when he transitioned. We had made up at that point. Um, but anyway, if I was in the room with someone that was transitioning, I would tell them that they did everything right, that there's nothing wrong, that there's nothing that they didn't do that they should have done. There's no regrets to have right now. This is all perfect. Everything they did was perfect. Everything that happened was supposed to happen, and they're about to have the best, most amazing experience of their life because they're gonna go meet all their loved ones again, and they're going to I don't know, like, I get very excited about death because I know that we go to this amazing place, like, we go to this place where there's no pain, and there's no suffering, and there's no judgment, and we go to this place where we're so loved, like, oh,
Did you
so
think that our journey is just beginning at that point?
I think that our journey is continuing. So, like, I don't think our
Oh.
journey has a beginning or an end, really. I guess it must, but I definitely don't think there's an end. There could have been a beginning, maybe. But no, I think that we've been on this journey for a long time, actually. And I think it just continues. Um, well, I think okay, like, this is what I believe. I believe that when we die, we get to go wherever we want next. I
Mhm.
think that there are endless opportunities for endless adventures on all different planets, in
Mm.
all different places, even just on this earth. Imagine how many different life forms you could take. So I think this is just one little tiny drop in a really
Yeah.
big bucket, you know? And I think we just get to do as much as we want, and it's just
Mm.
illusionary that we don't. Like, it's illusionary that we're stuck or that this is taking a long time? At the end of someone's life, every time they'll tell you how short it was, you know?
Isn't it
Mm.
something how, well, myself, yourself, and
Mhm.
so many other people out there,
Yeah.
doing this heart-led work,
Yeah.
um, seem to have such a crossing, like their life is around life and death all the time. And if
Yeah.
they go back and they look at the little spiritual breadcrumbs that were left, you could, like, you were made to do this. Like, you were
Mhm.
meant to do this, I should say. Like,
Yeah.
it's like you left yourself little breadcrumbs
Yeah. To show your path. Yeah.
to remember, oh,
Yeah.
something kicks in and that little, and then you go then like, oh, I kind of remember that. Well, now I got to have a near death
Yeah.
experience to actually wake me the heck up, right?
I really think that the near death experience was kind of like an activator. Like, it was
Yeah.
kinda like I came here to do this thing, and I didn't know what this thing was. I couldn't remember, because I'm veiled, and then I kept getting these little hints, "You're supposed to do this thing, you're supposed to do this thing," and I would feel it, like, all
Mm.
my life, I felt
Me
people
too.
waiting for me, and I was always like I never understood what that is, like, I still feel it, like, I feel like there's people waiting for me, like, that they're desperately praying for me or waiting for me or I don't know what
That's
it
a
is.
weird way. I feel that same thing. That's such a good
Yeah,
way of putting it.
yeah. So
Interesting.
So during the near death experience, I think that was me waking up to understanding that I came here with more in mind. Like, I didn't come here to just suffer. I didn't come here to just be a mom, you know. I came here to do this part at this time and then this part at this time, and then it all leads into this really beautiful part now, you know. Like, definitely when I was a mom, I was meant to be a mom, you know, like, that's all I was really meant to do was be a mom, you know, for all those years and dedicate myself to that. But then when they started growing up and going to college, it was like, well, now I'm meant to do something else, and that's how I started getting into, you know, being a spiritual teacher, and oh my goodness, this is so fulfilling. This is fulfilling
Mm.
just like being a mom was, you know? It's just a different kind of fulfilling, you know?
I'm not a
So
healer or a guru or anything like that,
mhm.
but I can say that this is probably the most fulfilled I felt in my life
Yes.
ever.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
Compared to what I was doing, again, I was a young mother too, single mother.
Mhm.
We have very
Yes.
many things in our lives are very similar. But I
Yeah.
want to ask you this.
Okay.
So, your near death experience eventually led you into numerology and
Mhm.
basically your calling. Can you tell
Mhm.
us about any services, offerings, published works that you have and where people can find you?
Yes. So, there's a lot to list, but you can
And
go
you'll
to
give
my
me all those, right?
yes, you can go to my website, which is just my name.com, TamiLoPresti.com, okay? That's where you'll find, like, the hub of everything, basically. I do teach Wizard School, which is a 30-week program to turn into a numerologist yourself to get certified and all of that. And I also set people up with their own businesses. By the time they're done, they're already getting paid, so, you know, it's really cool. It's a really great program. I'm really proud of that. I also do readings and I also do coaching and you know, I make meditations. I've been on a lot of podcasts now talking about my near death experience. I have my own podcast, so I interview other people. I'm kind of just everywhere, you know? And like I told you earlier, I was in a show on Gaia TV, so that is live now, you know? That just became live a few months ago, you know? So that is a really interesting experience, and you guys should definitely check that out. Um, my cat comes, of
I
course.
love when the cats do that.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
always wanna be part of everything.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Yes. But yeah, you can find me, on my website. That's the best place to find me.
Okay.
Um, and that'll lead you everywhere else, you know, that I
Okay. And
am.
we'll
So,
have that in the
yeah.
description below.
Of course.
And Tammy, what would the return be without a signature question, right?
Okay.
So now everyone that returns with a truth.
Mhm.
What truth did you return with that you feel humanity needs to hear?
Oh, that's a big question.
Hmm. Yeah, take your
Um,
time. It's all good.
okay. I think I think if you really want, you know, a really clear answer, I would say there's more. Like, there's a lot more, and this is not all that there is. This is an illusion, you know, like, this is a very elaborate story, you know, a very elaborate play or something like that, and there's so, so much more, and, you know, you didn't lose anybody, they just changed form and they're all right here with you, you know, and you'll be with them, like, in a second. So, like so love your life as much as you can because,
Oh,
you know, it's so
mhm.
short. It doesn't feel that way, but it's so short, you know? So do all the things you feel called to and this isn't all, you know, this isn't all you'll
Oh,
do. This is a very small amount of what you'll do, you know?
oh,
So
Tammy.
I don't know.
That was so
I don't know what
beautiful.
the right answer is, but, I
There
don't know if there
there's
is a right.
never a right answer when
Yeah.
it comes to that question, and how
Yeah.
you said it, you put it eloquently, and I
Yeah.
agree with you on that, so thank
Yeah.
you. I
Yeah.
love hearing what people say to that because it's something that
Yeah.
puts them on the spot, and I like to see
Yeah.
what comes to them. I think you did well there.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Tammy, you know, I've got to know you over the last little while,
Mhm.
so I
Mhm.
am very honored that you're here with me
Aw, thank
again.
you. Thank you.
And I really am. I'm very
Mhm.
grateful. And your
Yeah.
story isn't just about surviving, it's about awakening. It's about
Mhm.
how you walk through violence, through death, and into an encounter with something so profoundly loving.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I want to thank you from my heart
Mhm.
for bringing your truth, your courage, and your light to the returned.
Thank you for having me. This was really nice. I feel
You're
honored as
welcome.
well.
Oh, thank you. And to everyone that's watching, may this story be a gentle reminder that even when the darkness feels final, it isn't. There is a part of you that is stronger than what's happening to you. And sometimes the most profound chapters become the very thing that reveals who you truly are. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.